This is OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
Hour 2 OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We're live at the RBC Canadian Open. Beautiful Hamilton Golf and Country Club. What a scene out here. We're on the 13th tee, the rink hole. Brian Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan, and the Hall of Famer himself, James Duthie.
Wow.
Have you got
cool
everything
that,
now?
right?
Have you got everything?
Doesn't he have the key to the city, too?
Yes, and he's a Hall of Famer in Ottawa.
What's like...
Oh, which is bigger?
Well, what's the...
Oh, you can't make me choose. It's like choosing my favorite child.
I mean, does it make up? I always talk about it, where you had dreams when you were a kid. Like a Sens jersey, Duthie in the building, or like a Red Blacks Duthie jersey, and then you weren't good at sports. Does this all make up for it?
Then I wasn't good at sports.
Played flag football.
I told the story. I went in. One of the guys who got inducted into the Hall of Fame is a guy named Lyndon Hooper, who you guys wouldn't know, but soccer fans would. And so Lyndon Hooper, soccer was my first love, and I when you're 10 years old, you're delusional, right? And I thought I was awesome at soccer, because I played for this club called the Gloucester Hornets, and we won championship every year. My dad was the coach, so I played a lot. And so I thought I was awesome.
Yeah.
And then our arch rival was this team called Nepean.
How awesome, though, like best in Ontario?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking, okay, it's retrospect, but
Best in the city.
I'm thinking at 10, I'm going to play for the provincial team and then the national team and then, get an NCAA scholarship or whatever. So we go play Nepean one year, and when I was 12, and this kid named Lyndon Hooper has joined the team. He just moved from Guyana. And he was so good. And my dad said, you're going to mark this Lyndon Hooper guy, because he was schooling us. And after 12 minutes, I came off the field crying, almost puking, because he never stopped running and he just destroyed me. And I think that was my first moment, at 12 years old, that I realized, you're right, I am not an elite athlete. And I'm probably going to have to think of something else.
I was brokenhearted when I was 12 because I wanted to be the best hockey player in the world, but my own two brothers were better than me.
Right.
I'm I'm in trouble here.
So I told Lyndon at the ceremony, I said, you crushed my dreams, but you probably all led me to a sportscasting career, because I had to realize pretty early that I had to think of something else to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congrats, buddy. I mean, that's a really cool story. And,
yeah, thank you.
That was a cool scene. We saw you last night, or we saw some video come out anyway,
okay.
and you had a lot of the family and friends there. That's awesome.
What bothered me about it is I worked with him the night before.
I know, no one knew.
And
I told him I wanted to be there to introduce him, to bring him up there, and he goes, yeah, and then he just
he pretended he didn't know you at that point. He did the Craig Button where you walk in, it's I don't know these guys. But my whole thing is, I worked with him the night before, and I said, I'll see you on Wednesday. He's like, I got to go to Ottawa.
Yeah.
Well, what am I going to say? I'm sorry, I'm going into the Hall of Fame.
I'm going to Ottawa to be in the Hall of Fame.
Inducted into the Hall of Fame.
I would have fake phone calls. Yeah, I'll be there for the Hall of Fame 4:30.
I know.
And I didn't want to invite a bunch. You were kind enough to come down to the Key to the City thing. The worst thing, look, I'm the same way. If Hayes gets inducted, if let's say you were from New Brunswick and you got inducted into the New Brunswick something, I don't want to go to New Brunswick to clap for you.
I understand.
And I didn't want all my friends to have to drive 4 hours to Ottawa to have to clap for me.
Yeah.
So I just kept it to my Ottawa people.
But you could have let us know. That's the thing. We didn't know. I saw it on SportsCenter the next day.
Hey, everybody.
There was at least one guy from TSN there, wasn't there?
Bobby Mack?
Lanesy?
No, I didn't ask. No, Lanesy was busy. No, I didn't. I made sure nobody went. It was just all my Ottawa homies.
That's actually really nice of you, and I think considerate, because you're right. We love you, but we don't want to go to Ottawa.
No, we're not going to Ottawa.
I'm the same way.
Could have put a video together.
I didn't want to go to Guelph when you got into the Guelph hockey honors. I'm not driving an hour for that.
I was there for your jersey
You were the Bobby
retirement.
McKenzie. He was the only one that never showed up.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
actually went as a show, didn't we? Went up there.
No, well, we didn't broadcast there.
No, but we went there.
I remember that because my wife was pregnant. It was 2 days overdue, and we're there, and Duthie's playing golf back at King Valley or whatever.
Gave a 30-second video on the jump.
Now, I will say, came to the Key to the City. But literally, the second I walked off the stage with the key, he walked by and said, "Hey, thanks, I'm out."
Yeah, see you later.
Yeah. He was not hanging around for the party afterwards.
I drove there and drove back the same day.
I'm incredibly thankful.
That's commitment.
I'm incredibly thankful.
Well, it's good to see you, and obviously you're here doing stuff all week, naturally, for TSN, SportsCenter, everything. And we'll get to the golf in just a moment because we had Weeksy on, and we like where the Canadians are at. Like Mike Weir at 2 under is a great story, right? Like there's certain guys I think you look at the weekend, you're like, we want to see them make the weekend. You need McIlroy there on the weekend. Certain Canadians, you want to see Shane Lowry, Sam Burns have been great today. But the idea of Mike Weir playing 72 holes. Sorry, I feel like
you
I
guys are okay.
Whispering.
So just so you know, on your last segment,
yeah,
I went out down there to see
How loud
if you could hear
how
us.
loud it was, and you're a murmur.
Okay, that's
but
good.
you're not, and you're a murmur, and I was down probably 10 yards below.
Oh, they
Okay.
can't hear anything now.
So I don't think the guys on the tee are good.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
if you raise the volume to like, my wife always says, don't use your broadcaster voice when I'm at dinner. Or
like
something
relax
like
a little bit.
Yeah, if we tone it down a lot here, they're not hearing us.
I felt like we're screaming and it's echoing right out of
no.
here like a megaphone.
All right. Well, we didn't
That's
set
what it
this up. We're just here. We're professionals.
We're just working.
They're working, but so are we.
I'm telling you right now, next year I'll be on the site visit to look at things because that needs to happen.
We're gonna
J-Mac,
change-
You heard that live.
We're going to change the whole operation.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Mike Weir at 2 under. That's going to be a really cool story moving into tomorrow. The Oilers winning last night in the fashion that they did, the significance of this. Do you have a read on either series right now?
No, it's impossible, which is the greatest series. I mean, I think on the other series, I think Florida's better. And I think Florida will prevail.
They're playing better.
But you never know with Shesterkin. With Dallas-Edmonton, it is an absolute and utter crapshoot. I will say this. I've always thought that when Connor and Leon sniff a cup, that they will win it. And this is the farthest they've gotten now. They got to the conference final against Colorado, but they were swept, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah,
that or 5 games.
They were overwhelmed.
It was,
Yeah.
either a sweep or 5 games. So
Yeah.
they're already here with 2. They're 6 wins away. So this is the closest they've ever been. And they seem to sort of alternate even game by game or period by period, one of them taking over and looking like he's like Draisaitl in the second last night or the third was unbelievable, and Connor the other night in the first. So there's my only spidey senses think that they want it so bad that they might not be able to be stopped. But as soon as Dallas comes out and takes a 2-0 lead in Game 5, I'll change my mind.
The only
again.
thing that would verify that side for me is McDavid's having no reaction after goals. Like I thought that was a set play off the pad last
100%.
night. And Bouchard, if you look at Bouchard hammers in the net, and McDavid just skates to him. It's like, okay, we did this. Like that was it. There's no.
The only thing
fist bump or whatever.
disappointing, if I was his teammate, is if he did some kind of like fist pump, the crowd would go absolutely crazy. Like he has that ability to energize everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
And when he doesn't, it's just like, oh, there's McDavid. It's a goal. And where it could go crazy, like Draisaitl does.
Does that crowd need any more energy, really?
Oh, they're into it, man.
Yeah.
I had buddies there last night. Strutty messaged me at like 1:30 in the morning last night. He took his son. Said it was.
It was electric in the third.
He goes, Jamie, that's the loudest I've ever heard that. Bill. When Janmark scored the shorty.
Yes.
He said that's the loudest I've ever heard that building.
Yeah.
Which
says something because it's a great crowd.
The 2006 final, I still think was one of the loudest buildings I've ever heard. So Edmonton's is good at that, and I think it's up a notch with these two guys. But no, I think it's like Dallas is such a good team.
They
are.
are.
It's just so hard to predict, and that's the best series you could possibly have, right?
Jimmy, what do you think of the Edmonton media's treatment of Darnell Nurse? Unacceptable or fair? You decide.
I don't know what I didn't read the stuff. I saw this because I was busy with the Hall of Fame stuff. But I thought it was more social media that he was being attacked on. If the media was hard on him, I mean, he wasn't playing well. That was unusual for him to have I go by what Ryan Rashog says because he's there every day, to have a short, terse news conference like that. I don't know that you ever win doing that.
Right.
Although after the first couple of goals, he played a really good game, I thought, last night. So the one thing I would say about, certainly in the playoffs, I think you have to forget what guys are making in the playoffs.
It's impossible to do that.
I know it's impossible.
It really
to
is
do.
impossible.
You can't.
It is, but it doesn't matter,
No, I
right?
understand
Everybody's
that.
making the same in the playoffs. So Darnell Nurse doesn't have to play like a $10 million player. He just if he's decent, as your fifth best defenseman, but he's okay, and he somehow contributes to the cup. That's enough, right? But nobody can get that through their
it
mentality.
doesn't matter.
You can only do that in retrospect once you've won.
Yeah, I know.
I've always said it doesn't matter what you did to get you a Stanley Cup. You don't have to explain anything. In other words, you could have made 2 or 3 of the worst deadline trades of all time.
Right.
5 first-round picks for a 7th defenseman. If you win the cup, it's like, hey, I made the moves and everything worked out.
Correct.
We'll figure
Decent
everything.
work by the GM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But until you get to the finish line, you can't have that kind of perspective. And also, and I don't like that the NHL's done this, but we're almost 20 years in. This is the reality of it, that everyone's got to be a mathematician, and everything's a math formula, and it's this big equation that you have to put together, because it's not as much about, well, Nurse is making that. It's that if he wasn't making that much, we wouldn't have to play this guy who's a stiff, who's making $850.
Right.
We'd have another $3 million to pay for a better player on the third line.
Everyone,
whatever. So
I know. I just feel like once you get to the playoffs, there's nothing you can do about it.
No, I understand.
You have what you have, and it is what it is.
Yeah, your expectations are high also because of the money. The money indicates you're a good player that needs to bring something.
And salary disclosure, that's what you are. You can. Darnell Nurse could walk into this room right now. All you think is that guy makes $9.5 million, 9.25. William Nylander walks in here. All our conversations next year is that guy's making 11.5.
Let me ask you a question.
That's all we're going to think about.
If Edmonton ends up winning a cup, do you think Nurse will let bygones be bygones, or do you think he'll be vindictive with the media and like
I don't know.
Do you think at the rally he'll say everyone was all over me? How about that?
I think if you're
Chew
a part
on
of an
that.
organization where the ultimate goal is to win a Stanley Cup, if that happens, I think there's 1 or 2 players on every team in every organization that'll be like, we won our cup, check please, I am out of here.
Yeah,
Whether you can get a suitor or a taker, I don't know, but there's a bunch of guys that would be like, we did our thing, we got the cup, I'm gone.
I don't know. Like, the only experience I have with this, and it wasn't Stanley Cup, but when Pronger went to St. Louis, for the first year and a half, the fans booed him because Shanny was a crowd favorite. And Prongs was this skinny, defenseman who had all this ability, but he was, 19 or 20 or whatever it was.
They booed Eddie the Eagle in Toronto.
They booed him for a year, but Prongs brought it up in his speech when they were putting his jersey to the rafters. He brought it up.
Right, still rattled probably about it.
He said, you guys weren't good to me in the first 2 years, but he's like, where are we at now? And he goes, I embraced you, you embraced me. He actually brought it up because I talked to him. It stung. He's like, he goes, what did I do? I got traded there. It was traded for a fan favorite. Brendan Shanahan was entrenched in the community. He was a superstar. And he goes, they got this skinny kid on defense. He ended up being the captain, winning the Hart, winning Norris, being one of the greatest players of all time. But somewhere along there, there's still some scar tissue. That's my point. So with Nurse,
that's what I'm saying.
There might be some scar tissue.
I guess what I mean is he? Look, he hasn't had a good playoff, but is he?
That's undeniable.
Is he the 100%?
Yeah.
But is he the worst defenseman in the world?
No.
Or if he was making $4.5 million, would we be having any of these conversations? It would be different.
But that, I think, speaks to your point. It shouldn't be, because it really is in the playoffs. It's did you win or did you lose?
Right. I know, but the
That's
money
all that
difference.
matters.
I told you the other day. The money difference is if he's making 4.5, that translates to he's got to be better. 9.5 is like, man, what the hell is going on here?
You're
That's
still
the difference.
bent out of shape, because 4.5, $1 million, $15 million. If you don't play well and you're the reason you're losing, and it's not just him; it's a team sport.
Right.
People are going to focus on that. But there's also another element to it. If you're making $3 million, the coach can take you out of the lineup. He can't do it when you're making $9 million.
Truth.
Because the GM's like, are you nuts? We're not doing that.
Yeah.
Like that, he's actually, in a weird way, and I don't think they would have taken him out anyway, because he's an important piece and a good player.
That's a spicy meatball. You want to pull that out of the lineup, man.
But I'm just saying, if he's making if there's a player playing like him, getting chewed up at times, making 2, they'd have a chat about it.
Yeah.
You cannot have a chat about it when a guy's got 6 years left or whatever at 9.
Keep in mind,
he's not coming out.
They're in the third round of the playoffs. If you're in the first round and you're down 3-1 in the series and he's stunk the joint out and they don't like what they're seeing, that's when you make these bold moves. You pull somebody out, you do this. But, Chris Knobloch, you look at the 3 guys that he inserted last night. All 3 played pretty damn well.
Yeah, they did.
Perry gets on the scoreboard. McLeod gets on the scoreboard. And that Broberg looked pretty decent. Like, he didn't look out of place. He looked like he was just, hey, you know what? I'm going to play a safe game, play a smart game. So it's
he's got a little magic going on right now, Knobloch.
I like him, man. I like how he does his business.
The goalie switches in Vancouver, both of them kind of worked. And if you think of must-win games or almost must-win games, right? So they've had two must-win games when they're down 3-2 to Vancouver. But I always consider if you're down 2-1 in a series, that's an almost must-win game. Because down 3-1 to Dallas, you're probably not winning 3 in a row. Down 3-1 to Vancouver, you're not winning 3 in a row. So they won both of those. So they're basically 4-0 when they have had to have a win so far in the playoffs. And the coach deserves a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely.
And think of this last night. I don't know if it crossed your guys' minds, but at 2-0, no timeout. Maybe you change the goalie. Maybe you do something, right? Like, Nurse is the two guys that are under most duress and fire are front and center. It's Skinner and Nurse. Right?
And he let it breathe, and he trusted
and he let it breathe
in their
and said,
maturity
okay,
as a group.
But you know what? If you have a knee-jerk reaction and go, Pickard, get out there, switch the D pairings up. If the coach shows panic, the team shows panic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, it is.
And it was a good, I can call it now in retrospect, but it's a good non-pull. And he stuck with it. Skinner actually made some good saves, settled in. Mm-hmm. I thought, it was awkward he made that right pad save. It kind of was spinning, but that would have made it 3-0. And he made a good glove save in the third period on Sagan in alone. So there was a couple good saves from Skinner, but that could have gone really south really quickly.
It was going south.
It was.
Quickly, and they stopped it and they moved it north. James Duthie with us. Who's been great, too, is Connor Brown. You talk about redemption. Yeah. Like, Connor was taking a lot of heat. Jeff Jackson and his connection and the bonus
structure.
Some
big plays.
Dude, I've really liked his game. He looks like what he was playing like a few years ago. Like, he's making plays. It's no question he's in action every night. He's skating well. I've really liked what I've seen out of Connor Brown.
Do you see just to interrupt breaking news, Trump found guilty on all counts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We won't get into a long discussion, but I was just giving you the news update for everyone driving home in their car listening to OverDrive.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Were we expecting that today? Like, I haven't been following
I think they thought because it was such a long case and there was 34 separate counts that it was going to take Friday or something like that, but they didn't waste a lot of time. Anyway, I did not want to interrupt the discussion. I do not want to get into a discussion on this. I just wanted to break the news.
Okay, broken news. There you go. Trump guilty on 13 different counts. I don't think it's going to make a difference personally on anything in terms of the election and all that, but we'll see what happens in the end. Game 5 tonight, Rangers-Panthers. You said Panthers have been better. I think everyone sees it that way.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
But it means
really.
absolutely nothing. Best 2 out of 3. 2 of them are at the Garden, and you got Shesterkin in that.
Yeah.
What do you think the best final is? I guess there's a different answer for Canada and the States.
Yeah, up here,
right?
it's Edmonton's more compelling, obviously.
Edmonton Rangers.
I think that's if you're the league. Now, I think the league might say Dallas because it's a massive American market. But if the Mavs are in the final, it's going to be split down there. You're not going to get as much Dallas coverage and love.
ESPN would want Dallas, New York.
Yes, they would.
Right?
Because
That's what
of the
the
market.
States would
They
want.
also wanted to drag out for 6 months.
This is, though, a perfect example,
insane, man.
of where, and again, I can't speak on behalf of Bettman and everyone. Maybe they would have this answer. But I can tell you, if it was the NBA equivalent, and you said LeBron could make the NBA Finals for the first time, and he's in Cleveland, they'd say Cleveland's your pick. Over Dallas or L.A. or anything because it's LeBron. It should be the exact same thing with McDavid.
It should be.
If you're the league, you need this guy winning. You need him in a cup final. It's the best thing possible, especially if it is New York. You get McDavid on Broadway for a cup, you can't write that any better.
No.
That should be perfect.
But if you look at it, Florida has every bit of reason to be there.
That's not my point.
No, but you're talking from
Yes, I'm saying marketing. You give me an opportunity to write a script. McDavid on Broadway to win the Stanley Cup. I don't think you can script it much better than that.
Can we get to the point that O just sort of mentioned? The Stanley Cup Final schedule has been released, and Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, if it goes that far, would take place on June 24th.
Which is ridiculous.
And we're past the COVID time when the season was starting late. This is the new way it is, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's the American networks want it that way, and I'm not sure exactly why, if it's that they want opposite nights of the NBA Final or whatever it may be.
But, Jimmy, even if they want it a certain way, someone's got to be able to go to them, and I get it, it's big money TV, and say that's just too long.
Never going to happen. And, I'm one of those guys that believes the Stanley Cup should be handed out before we've turned the calendar from May to June.
Yep.
But just so it's never going to happen because American TV pays the money, and for whatever reason, as it's NBC always wanted it a little bit later in June and always wanted Wednesday night and Saturday night, and so there's always these 2-day breaks between games. But this is the way we're going to have it going forward, is that the Stanley Cup's going to be handed out after June 20th. And that makes, of course, you could be saying I'm selfish because it delays my summer, but I just think that's ridiculous. Like, it's full summer in Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to say nothing of the U.S., like you go down to Dallas, it's 100 degrees down there.
I was just going to say,
Florida,
if it's Dallas, Florida, the ice is going to be slush.
It'll be slush.
ridiculous.
They've kind of figured it out a little bit.
I know, but I've played in both of those rinks.
Dallas is an issue because the Mavs are playing, so they're putting the boards down. Like that, the ice gets chewed up when you got to flip it back and forth. But this has always been the NHL's argument. Like, if we're going to be in the Olympics, why aren't we in the Summer Olympics? And it's a good point. The Olympics are going to overlap basically with the Cup Final. If you're playing the Cup Final in late June, why can't you be in the Summer Olympics?
It would be ludicrous.
It would be silly, but basketball's in the Summer Olympics, and they have the same winter schedule that the NHL has.
Let's take you from the 100-meter swimming final to Canada versus Czech Republic.
Have they started building the rink in Italy yet? I feel like it's going to be an outdoor rink. Like it's ridiculous.
I think they'll be ready for it. Yeah,
they better.
We'll be gearing up on that. I'm sure on July 1 we'll have our Olympic battle, right?
It's Trade Center in July 1st. There's always the staples are the Canadian Olympic team and the U.S. Olympic team.
Get your rosters ready,
Brian
gentlemen.
Hayes versus what? Craig Button?
Maybe Craig. Emily Kaplan will be in there, I'm
Craig
sure.
J will be on fire, as you know.
Yes.
But here's the thing.
I think he's liking the American team right now. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he's liking where the Americans are at.
I want to issue a challenge before we leave. You know, we've heard a few Hayes is a fraud. I know you're sick of it. I know it's old. But to anyone coming out to the Canadian Open on the weekend, I think it would be cool. You always have these meatheads that yell mashed potatoes or what's the Howard Stern thing?
Ba-ba-ba-booey.
Oh, yeah.
If we get like Rory on Sunday, you know, leading by 1, and right after he tees off, we get a Hayes is a fraud, and Jim Nance is just confused. That would make the Canadian Open
I would
for
be
me.
willing to accept that.
If he looked at Immelman and said, he is a fraud.
Immelman with his little.
That might be the greatest moment in the history of OverDrive if we get a Hayes is a fraud on Sunday at the Canadian Open while Nance is commentating.
You're right. If Nance is like, let's go to 13. Here's McElroy in the lead. Hayes is a fraud. Just like
Trevor?
And if he's all
Jimmy,
confused
I don't know what
about
he was
it.
referring to there.
Yeah, well, exactly. And they talk about it afterwards. That would be actually great for our show. So I support that idea.
Okay, all right.
Please promote us. We are asking for that. We support that. All right, JD, enjoy yourself out here.
Yeah, it'll be an awesome weekend.
Absolutely. There he is, the Hall of Famer, James Duthie.
And key to the city.
And the key to the city. He's got it all out there in Ottawa. It's just a matter of time before Aurora. Does Aurora have a Sports Hall of Fame?
It does.
Okay, you got to get in there.
I know that because I used to host that one, but then Rod Black takes care of it now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, he's busy. His kid's in the show. He's, there's a lot going
Bobby
on
Weeks
there.
is in like 9 Hall of Fame, so we'll never catch it.
Bob is in. I noticed that when we went to Weston that one time. I didn't realize he's in the curling,
the golf,
He's in the Hold on a second. He's in the curling Hall of Fame?
Bob Weeks was the Bobby Mack of curling
for sure
25 years ago.
Yeah.
Like the original curling insider was Bob
That
Weeks.
blows my mind.
And Dave Poulin's another one who's in about 9 Hall of Fames, like Notre Dame, the Philadelphia Flyers, Timmins,
I mean, Pooley,
everything. Pooley will
that's just
accept
so
an
random.
invitation.
Bobby Weeks is so amazing out here, but it's just
curling's his first love.
Wow.
I think
if you
I think I'm done at
proposition
one. I think I'm done at one.
You've had enough with just Ottawa's
I think
enough
I'm
for you?
done at one.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, there he is, James Duthie. We've got Steve Phillips coming up on the Manoah injury. What happened with the Mets and the Mets game last night? We'll get into a number of things with Steve. We're live at the RBC Canadian Open at the Rink Hole, Hamilton Golf and Country Club. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.
Now, back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Everybody get your roll on. I know shorty and she doesn't want no slow song. Had a man last year, life goes on. Haven't let the thing loose, girl, in so long. You been inside.
Phillips coming up here in a moment on the Alek Manoah elbow injury last night, him leaving the game. The Jays getting a sweep. Yes, it's the White Sox, but still, if you play Chicago every single series, this team, they'd win 110 games. Be great. But sadly, that's just not a reality. They're off today. They got Pittsburgh starting tomorrow.
Going back to for whatever reason, and I hate to kind of change the topic, the comments yesterday bothered me about Keefe saying other coaches called him. Remember he said that?
Yeah, he said basically, welcome to the real NHL now, because Toronto is not the real NHL because it's a totally different beast.
Ask some of the players in Major League Baseball what it's like going from the Yankees to Detroit or Yankees to the White Sox, where they're terrible, they're not relevant. I don't know what it is about that comment yesterday, especially when the coach, who had multiple opportunities in the playoffs, couldn't get the team over the hump, and then he exits stage left and says, "Oh, I'm back in the real NHL." Now, that comment really bothered me. If he had won a couple rounds, he would have seen a different league than the NHL with how fired up people would be and how excited people were. Instead, they can't get it done, and he makes that comment on the way out the door. It bugged me, and I didn't like it.
Well, it's an interesting one, because what he's doing is he's not giving. It's not his words. He's saying other coaches are saying this.
I think it's the perception.
I know, but he had to come out with it.
I know that you don't have to say that on the record, clearly.
That's the thing. That's the other thing. You probably don't have to say it. Or if you say it, like people have said it to you, personally, you don't have to shine a light on it. That's what it is. But I just took it as, from a context standpoint, is he's been on this giant platform, like the Yankees, like the Cowboys. The Leafs are this giant platform. And the rest of the league, or most of the league, the Rangers, I think, are in there, and Chicago, original six.
And Noodles, when you're in a massive market and you don't get it done, it can be noisy. That's just what you get with a massive
100%.
following and a giant fan base.
Yeah.
And when you win, it's better than anything else. But when you never win, you'd never know.
Well,
and that's why you have those thoughts and preconceived notions.
And you're also very well compensated up here. Like the Leafs pay their coaches a lot of money. There's a lot of teams in this league that don't pay that much, relatively speaking.
Yep.
And I guess they're in the real NHL, though. And up here, you're given basically a blank check to fill out your staff, to make sure you got everything possible that you need. And I said that last week. Like, Sheldon is going to experience the NHL in a different fashion. I don't 100%. Think it's the real NHL compared to Toronto, but at some point he's going to go up to Tom Fitzgerald and say, "You know what I had in Toronto that I'd love to have here?" And Fitzy's going to say, "Are you nuts?"
Yeah, we don't have.
I was going to ask his new assistant coaches, "Where's the this or that?" And they're going to be like, "Don't even think about that happening."
Right, and that's just because owners around the league are like, "We don't have that type of budget." Where the Leafs have an unlimited budget. Now, it hasn't benefited them from wins and losses. Let's clarify that. It doesn't mean Sheldon's going to be a poorer coach or a worse coach because he doesn't have access to the same thing.
But he might not have the resources that were afforded to him here.
Yes.
And I don't know what those resources would be, but there is going to be a moment where it's like, the old saying, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah,
like
not in Toronto anymore.
You're not in Toronto anymore because it isn't, they might stay in different hotels, though. They might, it might be a little different, different setup on certain things.
Airplane, food, all of it. Chefs in the morning, chefs in the afternoon, chefs everywhere.
Here's the other thing, too, is what if, I always thought this, if he was a big part of music in practice, what if he tries to fire up, where's the DJ? Yeah. And they go, sorry, we don't have music.
Do we have a sound
practice.
System here?
Yeah, because I remember my buddy going to practice and going, there's a DJ in the corner. And they're doing breakouts, and it's, Bieber's on in the background, which is a
wild decision.
You think Craig Berube's going to go, you know what, like, hey, turn the music up here. We need a beat while we're working on 3-on-2s. I think Craig Berube will go over with a stick and he'll break that thing in half.
He might, especially if they've lost 3 or 4 in a row. That was always the wild thing. Couple of losses. Hey, take the night off. Or, hey, we're going to get the club going down here. Let's see if we can get a couple of skills competitions planned out here. I don't think that's going to be happening in the future. But we'll get back into that comment because I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And, again, I don't know if it came from a position from Sheldon where he was trying to light a fire or take shots or something.
I find the whole thing tiring. It's like the Canadian media and playing up there like it's some igloo. I played for 2 different organizations, and the Toronto one, you can't get better of everything that's available.
Yeah.
Like, it's the most passionate fan base, and you've said it best. The reason that all the craziness is going on is because they've been starving for some kind of success, and it's never happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's Steve Phillips, our TSN MLB analyst. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm intrigued by the conversation and all that goes into it. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter what sport. So many similarities, right, with owners and plans and directions and money and all of that, the impact and expectations from a fan base as well.
Well, you would know it in New York. I mean, we were discussing these comments from the Maple Leafs, now former coach, new coach down in New Jersey with the Devils. And listen, the Leafs in Toronto, it's the biggest hockey market in the world. It's a beast. It is kind of what the Yankees are, the Cowboys are. And you can speak to it in New York. That's the hub. That's the capital of baseball around the world. There's nothing bigger than baseball in New York. And as the GM of the Mets, what life is like in New York compared to, I guess, everywhere else. Yet you have to embrace it, do you not? Like, why wouldn't you want to take on that challenge?
Right. No. Like, I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I was given to be able to do it. But I will tell you that I always thought that being the Mets general manager was the hardest sports executive position in any sport, in that you're in the market with the Yankees, same market. And when I was there, they had George Steinbrenner, and I had, the Will Ponce and Doubledays owning the team, and they had a completely different philosophy between George Steinbrenner said, spend whatever you need to do to win. And I had a budget, and, you work off a budget, and, there's not money there, and you just follow that. Yet the expectations were the same. The history and tradition of the Yankees was what it was, and the Mets didn't have that as an expansive franchise in the 60s. And but the expectations were the same, and yet the investment from ownership wasn't the same. The desire to win wasn't the same, and success was deemed championships for the Yankees, but success for the Mets was, are we making money? And that it's completely different, right? It's a completely different animal in the way that you run the team. Yet the expectations to run a fan base and the media was the same. They said, well, why aren't you doing what the Yankees are doing? I'm like, well, I can tell you why. But, you got to be careful saying it out loud when you're the general manager, because you're not going to throw your owner under the bus in any part of it. But, yeah, completely, the expectations and living with that. And when you're in those positions, I mean, listen, you don't sleep well. You don't sleep well, and you age. It's like, I don't know what it's like there with the prime minister, but I know in the States they show the before and after people who are presidents and the wear and tear. And it's the same thing for executives in New York. You age. I mean, my hair turned white quick in New York, doing that job, just because it is the stress level of, and I had death threats and stalkers, and I had, people saying they'd run me off the road, and I had, them security people saying, don't take the same route home in case they're following you. And I had to have an alias on the road, and I couldn't go on the field in batting practice in some places. And, a psychologist called up and said that her patient was a threat to my life. This guy was making threats, and she was able to betray the confidence then because it was a threat. And I had security check it out, and they told me, well, we don't think he'd hurt you, but he might come here and kill himself in front of you. And I'm like, this is what I'm dealing with, in addition to trying to put a team together to deal with the expectations of it all. And I mean, it was crazy. And then those jobs, they're not jobs. It's a lifestyle. It's 162 games in 187 days. That's not counting spring training. And then at the end of the season is when the work starts to put it together. And so, yeah, it's in every sport, they're crazy jobs. And obviously in Toronto with hockey, it is king there. And the energy, the expectations of all of it. But when you win, it is the greatest thing in the world.
That's right.
But when you lose, it is painful.
Steve, how about those Mets right now? Like, that's just, it seems like a major league sequel or something. It's a gong show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it thinking, don't blame me. Don't blame me. And so, and it's funny because it is, there's always something that's going on. Now, this kid, Jorge Lopez, he's been on the injured
we
list
love him, Steve.
with mental health challenges, right? And it was believed by the writers that he said that this is the worst team ever. That's not what he said. He said, I'm the worst teammate in baseball. They didn't understand him, and they questioned him by feeding him, saying, did you say this was the worst team? He said, well, probably, but the English is a second language, got in the way of it, and I think they DFA'd him.
They did, yeah.
And they're cutting him because they thought he said this is the worst team ever, and he didn't say that. And so, look, it's not a healthy move to throw your glove over the net. I get it. And I had Turk Wendell once who threw his glove in the stands, and the biggest concern I had about it was somebody would figure out that he had pine tar on his glove. I wasn't going to cut him for that. He was, he cared enough about things, and so. I think this kid will land with somebody again. He's got a really good arm, and he's not a bad pitcher. He's not a bad guy, and he's had a lot of challenges in his life with his family and everything that I'm aware of and understand. So I've got a level of compassion for, the meltdown. And look, they're playing like crap. Honestly, you've lost 12 or 15 games. I want somebody to get mad about it. Jeff McNeil slammed his bat down to the ground the other day and threw a tantrum. And look, it's not the best example for kids and controlling yourself, but at some point I want to know that my players care enough that it's ticking them off that things aren't going well.
With Steve Phillips, tough scene for Alek Manoah and the Jays last night. The Jays win the game. They sweep the Sox. They're off today. They got Pittsburgh tomorrow. But Manoah with elbow issues last night leaves the game after he looked pretty good in the first. He's into the second inning. He's been back in the majors here now for about a month. What concerns you more about Manoah, the stuff or his health?
Yeah, I've done a little digging on it. His health is worrying me a little bit. And so, he said he felt it in his previous start, some pinching in the elbow. And then he rehabbed it during the week with the trainers. And everybody has aches and pains between starts, but this seemed a little bit different. And he threw his bullpen session, but not with the same level of intensity where you're sort of holding back. And he felt himself holding back and not really extending. And when he fully extended is when he started feeling it. So it's a concern, right? I mean, he started looking at the elbow, and it's been more than just one pitch. It wasn't the one pitch that did it. He's been dealing with this for a bit. And so I'm pretty concerned about it. And with it, I'm just concerned about, when players get hurt, they become invisible. And, he kind of went from being the man to being somewhat invisible last year, and he wasn't really hurt. And so this is more than a physical blow. It's an emotional and mental blow. He worked so hard to get himself back into the mix, and he tasted it again. And now to potentially be robbed of it, it's really going to have an impact on him. And so I hope that maybe it's nothing. Maybe they'll work through it. Maybe it's inflammation. Maybe it's just a bone spur that they can deal with. But, it doesn't feel really good right now. So I am pretty concerned about it.
Yeah, just a quick follow on that too, Steve. As far as being concerned on it is, we're knocking on wood for him, but worst case scenario, here's a guy who's, worked so hard to get back, has had a couple good starts in a row trying to settle back in. And if he's out of sight, out of mind, I was mentioning, if you look at his body, he looked in really good shape, and he looked like he'd worked hard to be in shape. But when you're injured, it's tough to stay in shape. So it's almost like you're resetting yourself back to where you could have been a year ago. Is that concerning too for a young athlete where,
Sure.
You say you're out of sight, out of mind? Now the team might have to look to fill that position instead of holding it for you if it's a lengthy injury.
Yeah, 100%. I think that a lot. This is where you've got to manage a player not on the field, but you got to manage him off the field. And I've seen players handle it in different ways. For some, it becomes a passion, and some guys have gotten better while they've rehabbed. They've gotten in better shape. They've worked harder. They've put themselves to where they're a completely different animal coming back, and they've tasted the mortality, and they don't ever want to taste it again. And so they really work to get themselves in shape and work hard and everything else. Look, you find out about people when they're dealing with adversity, and this is adversity, and so we're going to find out. Now, I will tell you that I like how he ended up bowing his neck and really working and getting himself turned around. It's not easy to lose it and then have to fight your way back into it when it came so easy before for him, and he did it. So he knows he can, and it's going to take a lot of people in his corner and a real support team to keep lifting him up and get him mentally right in order to get physically right.
Steve, I remember your comments regarding the Jays and what they're looking like for the upcoming season. Do you think you could put in an envelope where they will finish and what it will look like, and then just go on vacation and go to an island and then come back and be pretty confident what you put in the envelope would be true? Where they finish, what it's going to look like, fan angst, all of it?
I do, but boy, I don't want to miss out on doing these hits with you guys.
We can call you, man. We'll get you on the line. You can fake it to make it, no problem.
And I do get paid for some of this stuff. So I don't know that really I want to do that. But to your point, because, look, if it doesn't really turn around, then it's going to keep spiraling. And it's going to look worse because, at the deadline, they're going to make some moves. And they're going to become they may not be good enough now, but then they're going to become a lesser team for the last 2 months of the season if they trade away some of the pieces that that may be pieces to trade away. And so they're going to become a lesser team for the final 2 months of the season. And so it'll end up looking even worse at the end of the year if they don't get it turned around, if they don't take this momentum that they've gained here in Chicago. Which, look, they're beating the White Sox, but so what? Players can fool themselves. They just need to believe that they're locked in and they're hitting and they're pitching, they're hitting their spots. Doesn't matter that they're playing, the Washington Generals, the team that played the Globetrotters all the time. That's who the White Sox are right now. They're the team that played the Globetrotters. They put up a good fight, but they lose every game. And the home team or the other team always feels great about themselves coming out of it. And that's who the White Sox are this year as they rebuild. But, if the Jays don't take that momentum and don't build on it and don't start to believe themselves and don't add to their team and make themselves better than the last 2 months, then it could really unravel at the end.
If you were a rival GM, who would you be sniffing around? I mean, I know Garcia's name's always up there if they stink, but who else would GMs be saying, man? Because you're always picking at the carcass when teams are struggling, but who would you be looking at?
Yeah, so Dave Jansen is one. Now, I'm not always huge on picking up catchers in season because the learning curve of learning a new pitching staff, but Jansen's the kind of guy I think could do it free at the end of the year. Justin Turner, I'd love to add his profession. I know he's not played well here recently. Got off to a good start. He's cooled off. That's a professional player, professional hitter. I want him on my team down the stretch. Biggio would be a guy that I would take a flyer on and try to get, and if they're willing to deal him. He's not played great. I think a change of scenery would do him wonders to be able to do it. I'd be in on Bichette. I'd be in on Guerrero for sure. Kenner Falefa, I look at him as an extra guy. I don't look at him as an everyday player. I know he's playing every day, and he's played well recently. But if I needed a super sub type player and an extra player on the bench, he'd be somebody I'd have interest in. Kiermaier, only if I need a fourth outfielder and a defender. If I got somebody who's a slugger like Schwarber, maybe if I'm the Phillies and I look at it and think, geez, if I could play Schwarber the outfield and then end up having to replace him late in the game defensively, it might be something I would consider doing, although he can DH now for the Phillies unless Harper gets dinged up in some way and he needs to DH. And so there's, but I think, look, there's plenty of guys. Kikuchi, I'd have some interest in Kikuchi for a team out there looking for starting pitching. And I don't know, I wouldn't be moving Bassett or Gosman or Barrios in any way, but the bullpen too. I mean, I'd be in on everybody. I mean, not everybody, but I'd be on Jimmy Garcia. I'd be on Trevor Richards. I'd check in on Romano and see if they'd be inclined to do anything there. So, here's the thing. Now, think about it. I just rattled off 9 names of players that could help teams get to the playoffs. Why can't the Blue Jays get to the playoffs?
Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah,
good point.
Maybe
it's the other
9
17
names of
guys
who could be traded to help somebody get to the playoffs. Well, then why is this team not a playoff contender?
Well, I mean, that's the sum of the parts, right? That's what we always say. Individually, you look at certain guys and you're like, hey, I like what that guy can bring to the table. Now they're all not.
Though.
That's the thing. Like Romano's not pitching well. No. Like he has a history of closing games and getting things done, and he's got good stuff. But he is not
right now.
No, I mean Swanson's not even with the team. They had to act on him.
Yeah.
Those are guys prior to the season. If they're healthy, Steve, you're like. That's your 8th inning guy, 9th inning guy, and if they're up for grabs, you got to pay a premium to get them. Now, I don't even know what those prices look like. You can't trade Swanson right now. Yeah. I don't think you can.
Yeah, no.
So,
yeah, no. And what I've learned is typically when you trade for a reliever at the deadline, you don't typically get a change of scenery improvement. You tend to get what the guy was doing where he was doing it.
Right.
And so I would not. My experience is, and having made trades and traded away guys. That typically there's not a huge spike in the reliever you get from somebody else.
Always great catching up with you, Steve. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
You got it, my guys. My pleasure anytime.
Steve Phillips, our TSN MLB analyst and Baseball Insider. Steve Sands coming up.
Yeah.
From NBC and the Golf Channel, our good buddy Steve Sands, Pierre LeBrun still to come as well. Game 5, Rangers-Panthers. We'll look ahead to that. Keep looking back on the Oilers win last night. And we're tracking the RBC Canadian Open live from Hamilton. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN Plus. The RBC Canadian Open and coverage of the RBC Canadian Open on TSN 1050 is brought to you by Subaru. Embrace spring weather with the Subaru All-Weather Drive event. Visit your local Subaru dealer to book a test drive today. We're now up on TSN 2. Steve Sands will join us, our buddy Sandsy, in about 20 minutes. And, day one kind of wrapping up. There's still a bunch of guys out there on the course, but...
You had some good shots today. I got to tee it with you today with the Pro Kirky over at Dundas Valley, and you had some good moves.
Yeah, you felt good. What did you shoot? Like, you don't
I
want
don't
to
know. We're not going to get into it. But we love Kirky. That's all that matters.
You felt good?
I feel okay. That's all that matters. I feel fine, and it's more about the professionals who are here today because, things are rolling here. We got McIlroy shooting a 4-under hungover. I love hearing those stories.
Imagine if you had no game, like you weren't in form, and you just got wind of Rory McIlroy kind of staying out late with his caddy's birthday, and he just basically didn't want to check out the back nine, and he shoots 66.
Do you think he would admit to that if he was 2 over? Like, if he shot a 2 or 3 over today, do you think he goes, man, I'm groggy. I was into the red wine last
Probably
night?
not. It's like a power move.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a flex where it's like, by the way, I wasn't that good today, and I still shot 66, and I was out late with my caddy.
You know what I find interesting is that the broadcast, talking about it today, said he was playing like Scheffler, which speaks to how good Scotty Scheffler is.
No kidding.
That a guy who's older than him, who has won more majors than him, that is still a bigger superstar than him in McIlroy.
Right.
It's like if you play like that and you grind your way around a golf course and shoot well, now you're doing a Scotty Scheffler.
And I think that bothers Rory. Rory has said on that, what is the documentary, the...
Full Swing.
Full Swing. He's like, this is from Rory. He said, I like identifying as the world's #1 golfer. He goes, you can say what you want about that, but when I think of hearing my name, I like to see #1 beside
of course.
it, man.
Why wouldn't you, man?
And Scotty Scheffler is he's the man. The pace car right now.
He's the pace car right now.
Yeah.
That's it. To the point where McIlroy just had himself an impressive round where he didn't play well, got himself in some trouble. I think he was even on the front, but battled and went low on the back. Wasn't feeling great, a little bit groggy.
But he's still going to hit 5 or 6 good shots where you're like, that's going to lead to a birdie.
Absolutely, because he's that good and he's that talented. But that's what Scheffler would do. Yeah. Like, that would be aggravating for players. It's Happy Gilmore and Shooter McGavin. Oh, really?
Scheffler was in the clink and shot a 66.
Yes, he did.
That's a
Scheffler.
That's a Scotty Scheffler.
That's something McIlroy, I don't think, could do.
To your point, the clink. He was in the clink.
Nah, he's a free man now. Scotty Scheffler's a free man.
Charges should have been
Charges are dropped. It took a while, and they let the dust settle, and they're like, all right, that's enough. Yeah. All right, final hour coming up. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.